When you check the properties of any material, for example, the slab, you will see in the material editor menu, in the refraction section, there is an option called transmission. Transmission is the ability of an object's material to allow light to pass through it. In this particular case, the transmission is zero, therefore, no light is passing through it, which is why the slab is opaque. If I were to increase the transmission all the way to 1, which is the maximum, and then apply it, you can see that this slab has now become completely translucent. In a similar manner, if we were to check the properties of the rest of these slabs, let us say the top row, we can see that in this particular slab, the transmission has been reduced to zero point 0.5, and in this slab, the transmission has been changed to 0.75, and in the final slab, the transmission has gone all the way to 1, which means that this is the most amount of light that the slab will allow to pass through it. However, there is another property that determines the transparency of an object. Let us take the example of this slab. Here, we can see the transmission is zero, which means low light is passing through it. And here we can see an option called opacity, which is set to the maximum, which is 1. Opacity is the degree of opaqueness of an object or the degree to which it will not allow light to pass through it. In other words, opacity is the opposite of transmission. When opacity is set to 1, that means no light will pass through it. Unlike transmission, which will allow light to pass completely through it when it is set to 1. In a similar manner, we can see that even though for the bottom row slabs, the transmission is set to 0 in all cases, you can see that the opacity is the one which has been set differently. In this case, it has been reduced to 0.75. And in the third one, the opacity is set to zero point 0.5, which means the opaqueness of the slab is reducing. Lastly, you can see that in this particular slab, the opacity is reduced completely to 0. This means that even though the transmission is 0, this slab is still allowing light to completely pass through it, making it appear more translucent than the slab with transmission set up to 1. Therefore, in this case, you can consider that opacity has a much greater effect than the transmission. In case you want a translucent material, you can opt for transmission set to 1. However, if you want a completely clear material with no tint whatsoever, it would be better to go with an opacity that is set to 0.